this job than I am, but it's mine to do, so I'm going to do it. He was the kind of man who, when given a job, did it.
The task promises to be herculean. He will have to build the world of tomorrow on solid basis, but Truman has no experience in international politics. In the 3 months he has been vice president, Roosevelt has only met him in private twice. Truman has been told nothing.
I fault my grandfather for not trying to bring him more into the picture. I wonder how much energy my grandfather had. I think he was well aware of his diminishing energy. And to bring Truman into the picture may have been more face of it.
2 months before his death, Roosevelt had met with Stalin and Churchill at Yalta. It was there, in Crimea, that the big three had laid the foundations for future peace. But the deals concluded were complex and full of ambiguity. Each of the allies having played his own hand. Truman was not privy to these discussions. He needs to familiarize himself with all the dossiers. He is pragmatic and hardworking, so he has countless briefings with his advisors. But will his relentless word be enough? Can this small-time tie salesman from Missouri hold his own against the formidable Stalin? 1 month after Truman accedes to the White House, the Allies win the war in Europe.
Do not pay somebody to build you a Shopify store, because I'm going to do it free with 20 handpicked products by myself and my expert team, and professionally written ad copy for all of those products at no charge. And if you don't believe me, I dare you to click on this ad, go to the next page, and see if I ask you for a single penny. And I'm doing this because I am a Shopify partner and an endorsed commerce coach by their platform, and they're actually going to pay me to build your store for you if you like your store and you actually keep it. And if you don't believe me, again, I'm going to share my screen right now, and I'm going to show you how my software will build your store for you at no cost, as long as you take care of setting up your Shopify plan. All right, check this out. This is a quick example of what the store looks like. So you'll be able to have a top band.
All over the continent, people are jubilant. Outside Buckingham Palace in London, a human tide greets Winston Churchill. The British Prime Minister is lauded as a hero. But even at this euphoric moment, Churchill looks strong. The smile on his face looks a little forced. In his memoirs, he writes,
Weary and worn, impoverished, undaunted, and now triumphant, we shared a moment that was sublime. Yet it may well be there were few whose hearts were more heavily burdened with anxiety than mine.
what could seem so terrible that it could darken such a moment? The problem Churchill has goes by the name of Stalin. Now the war in Europe is won. The Prime Minister is convinced that Stalin will seize this opportunity to install communist regimes everywhere he can. Already, contrary to the pledges made at Yalta, the Soviet leader has established a communist regime in Romania. In Poland, 6 non-communist ministers have been allowed to join the government, but they have little less power every day.
Stalin wanted all of Europe to become communist. It was an ideology. But also because he had the mindset of an emperor. A dictator with an emperor's mindset.
The British Prime Minister tries to warn Truman. But the new American president is not interested. For now, Truman has taken the tack that he will honor the agreements made by Roosevelt. He will not have a word against his communist ally. Churchill can only wait and hope that Truman will see the Soviet leader's true colors for himself. The opportunity soon arises. July 16, 1945, Berlin Airport. The U.S. President's plane has landed. Truman is in Europe for a peace.
Where? Oh.
This is his opportunity to meet his allies and make up his own mind about them. Talks are to take place at Potsdam, a few miles from Berlin. In order to get there, Truman has to go to the former calculator Third Reich. Berlin is nothing more than a land of ruins. A few bone-weary people wander around aimlessly. The scene of desolation upsets Truman and convinces him that he needs to help Germany get back on its feet. That evening, he writes in his diary,
Never have I seen such a sorrowful and terrible sight. We saw old men, old women, and young women carrying what they could of what they had left, to nowhere in particular.
the conference begins on the next day, July 17th. Here at Cecilienhof Castle, Truman, Stalin, and Churchill meet for the first and only time. As Truman expected, Churchill seems calm. But his advisors keep telling
Oh my
him
God, I
that
pushed it.
Stalin is not to be trusted. However, the new president quickly sizes up the man with whom he'll have to negotiate.
I can deal with Stalin. He's honest, but cunning as hell.
Stalin, on the other hand, has no concerns about Truman, whom he just sees as a small-time shopkeeper from Missouri.
Stalin knows very little about Truman because he was a bit part player. His spies hadn't really spoken about him, and what they had said led him to believe that he was insignificant and weak, and could be made to agree to anything. But Truman is a man who sticks to his guns.
For against all expectations, despite his lack of experience, the American president knows how to stand firm. He's in no way cowed by Stalin. A matter of character, certainly, but not only that. Truman feels he's in a strong position. Because he is waiting for a piece of information that could make him the most powerful man on the planet. At that precise moment in the United States, a top-secret event is being prepared. While he's negotiating, the president is keenly anticipating some news. On day 2 of the negotiations, he finally receives a telegram in coded language.
Dude!
Doctor has just returned most enthusiastically and positive that the little boy is as husky as his big brother. The light in his eyes is discernible from here to High Hole, and I could have heard his screams from here to my farm.
The little boy in question is the first atomic bomb.
I was lazy today. So in the morning, I'd highlight and summarize all of my emails and Discord messages, schedule time in my calendar for calls with people, and even explain memes that people had sent to me. And it was doing...
For the last 4 years, the planet's finest scientists have been working in the greatest secrecy to develop what could be the ultimate weapon. The operation is codenamed Truth. The first nuclear test in history is an unqualified success. The explosion is the equivalent of detonating 21 kilotons of TNT. Never before has such destructive power been achieved.
means that henceforth the Soviet Union is in a position of inferiority.
Everyone was watching out for Stalin's reaction. And Stalin, who was a good actor, said, "Oh, well, I'm pleased for you, and I hope you'll use it against Japan."
But was Stalin really in the dark? Despite the drastic measures taken by the Americans to protect the secrecy of their project, Russian spies had managed to infiltrate the Los Alamos base where the atomic bomb was being developed. Among them is Klaus Fuchs, a German physicist who has fled the Nazis. Fuchs, a fervent communist, is also a spy in the pay of the Soviet Union. For the last few years, the scientists have been passing on all of the plans for the atomic bomb to the Russians. Thanks to this information, the Soviet Union has begun to develop its own nuclear bomb. Despite this, on July 24th, when Stalin finds out that the American bomb is ready, he becomes anxious. There is nothing Stalin hates more than feeling alone.
Он после этого собрал как раз, значит,
He called together his entire Potsdam entourage,
перестал Потсдам.
and he asked them to tell the scientists and everyone else working on the atomic project that he wanted them all to speed up the creation of the Russian atomic bomb as much as possible.
Создать советскую атомную бомбу.
The bomb would become an obsession for Stalin. Until he has his own atomic bomb, the Supreme Leader will not feel confident facing the Americans. His relationship with Truman is about to become fraught. Potsdam will also be the backdrop for another configuration. In mid-conference, Churchill leaves the negotiating table to head for London to receive the results of the general election. A passionate Democrat, the British Prime Minister has thrown his hat in the ring once again. He's acclaimed throughout Britain in the weeks he spends campaigning. But as day dawns on the morning of the election, he has a final foreboding.
I woke suddenly with a sharp stab of almost physical pain. The power to shape the future would be denied me.
Churchill's intuition is correct. And to general amazement, he loses the election. Rather than their war hero, the British people have opted for a new man, the Labour leader Clement Attlee. The day after his triumph, Attlee settles into Churchill's still warm seat. Around the table, there is a general sense that there's been a casting error.
Clement Attlee is a man who seems truly insignificant. Churchill used to say he was a sheep in sheep's clothing. Or an empty car stops outside Downing Street and Attlee gets out. A modest man with much to be modest about. And this leaves Stalin puzzled. Because he was convinced that Churchill had all he needed to be able to rig the election, which in Stalin's eyes is what any politician worth his salt would do.
Faced with a lost and awkward Attlee, Stalin takes matters into his own hands. He's the last man standing of Yalta's Big Three. Under Attlee, Great Britain is now on the sidelines. There are only two superpowers left in the world, the USA and the USSR. Truman and Stalin meet face to face. Very quickly, the differences between the two men turn sour and become genuinely contentious. 5 days after Potsdam, Truman makes a decision which will have significant consequences. The USA will use its atomic bomb against Japan. This ratchets up the tension with Stalin. August 6th, 1945. In the early hours of the morning, the American bomber Enola Gay flies towards the Japanese archipelago. At 8:15, the little boy is dropped on Hiroshima. To be bombed. Stalin sees the atomic bomb as provocation. He's convinced that Truman is trying to intimidate him. He doesn't understand why America has launched its bombs when, on the 8th of August as promised, the USSR joined the war against Japan alongside the USA.
The way we saw it was that the U.S. was sending a clear message in using the atomic bomb against Japan. The aim was not to achieve a quick victory against the Japanese, but to intimidate the Soviet Union in order to be able to dictate American conditions.
Obviously, Truman wanted to end the war as quickly as possible and save American lives. But it is also a clear message to Stalin. Because Truman fully intends to let him know that he is now in the driver's seat. From then on, Stalin wants to know how much leeway he can get with Truman and decides to test him. Rather, Stalin was promised territory in exchange for joining the war against Japan. Sakhalin Island, the Kurin Islands, Dairen, Port Arthur, and a Manchurian railway line. But now, Stalin demands to be allowed to occupy Hokkaido Island. In a telegram to Truman, Stalin explains,
Russian public opinion would like to see our troops get an occupation zone in part of the archipelago. Anything to the contrary would be seriously offensive. I hope my modest request will be satisfied.
he then rethinks and adds in his own hand.
We'll meet with no objection.
The American president is outraged. His response is unequivocal. No. Period.
Grandpa expected people to be straightforward and honest. Those are the kind of people that's how he was. He expected people to be truthful with him and to be upfront. And when he discovered that they weren't, and he discovered that Stalin wasn't, he very quickly got his back up and began to deal with Stalin more roughly, more directly, more confrontationally.
Stalin has also decided to move things forward and press his advantage in Europe. Rigged elections, coups. Wherever he can, Stalin establishes communist regimes. Poland, Czechoslovakia, Hungary, and Bulgaria, in turn, all fall into Soviet hands. The rampant Stalinization of Europe worries Truman, but he's still unsure how to approach the situation. The telegram, which lands on his desk on February 22nd, 1946, changes everything. Its author is George Kennan, an ordinary diplomat posted in Moscow.
Oh!
Kennan is not trying to observe how Stalin operates. He has seen that Stalin wants to take control of Eastern Europe and is convinced that the only way to stop mission is to stand firm. In a long telegram to Washington, he describes the Soviet apparatus.
At the bottom of Putin's neurotic view of world affairs is a traditional and instinctive Russian sense of insecurity. Russians are impervious to the